There's a specific feeling you get in certain homes. You walk in and something just settles. You don't know why. The furniture isn't extraordinary. The space isn't large, but something about it works in a way you can't explain, and most people can't replicate. Because what they're replicating is the look, not the logic underneath it. Today, we're going through that logic. 6 psychological mechanisms your brain uses to evaluate whether a space feels expensive, and why most homes are quietly failing all of them. So have you ever walked into a room that has all the right things? The statement sofa, the layered cushions, the matching accessories on every surface, and still felt like something was off, like the room was working too hard? Well, this is one of the most common reasons a room fails to feel expensive, and it happens because of something called over-signaling. In most rooms that feel cheap, every surface is full. There's a candle next to a vase, next to a tray, next to a small sculpture, next to a stack of books. And when your eye scans a room like that, it doesn't see abundance. It sees effort. It sees someone trying to convince you that the space is well designed. And the brain, which is extraordinarily good at detecting effort, reads that trying as insecurity. Think about it like this. When someone walks into a room wearing every piece of jewelry they own, you don't think they're wealthy, you think they're anxious. A room works the same way. When every surface is covered, the brain doesn't calculate luxury, it calculates need. The need to fill, to impress, to prove. Expensive rooms do the opposite. They edit. They leave surfaces empty. And this creates what designers call the restraint signal. The brain's automatic recognition that whoever put this space together was confident enough to leave well enough alone. Because in interior design, nothing signals wealth quite like the ability to leave a surface empty. So to fix this, you have to start removing things. Take 20% of the small decorative objects off your surfaces. Not the furniture, not the art, the small accumulated objects that have quietly colonized every available inch. Because when you create that void, something interesting happens. The objects that remain immediately gain perceived value, and the room itself starts to breathe in a way it simply couldn't before. Restraint isn't minimalism, it's confidence made visible. Now, if the restraint signal is the reason cheap rooms feel anxious, and the material hierarchy is the reason they feel fake, there's a third reason they feel off, and it's the most invisible of all. It has nothing to do with what's in the room. It has to do with how precisely everything is placed. In high-end manufacturing, the difference between a luxury product and a cheap one is measured in tolerances, how tightly things fit together, how precisely components align. A Swiss watch and a cheap quartz one both tell the time, but the tolerances in the Swiss movement are 100 times tighter, and you feel it the moment you hold it. Your brain registers that precision as value before it even knows why. Rooms work in exactly the same way, and most rooms are full of what I call tolerance gaps, small misalignments that the eye doesn't consciously notice, but the brain quietly registers as evidence of a space that wasn't fully committed to. Curtains that are an inch too short, a rug that stops just before the sofa legs reach it, a picture frame hung slightly too high, a sofa that's 2 inches too small for its wall. None of these things will make you stop and think. That frame is slightly off-center, but all of them accumulate into a room that feels approximate. And approximate never feels expensive. Expensive rooms have 0 tolerance gaps. The curtains kiss the floor. The rug anchors every piece of furniture in the arrangement. The art is centered and hung at exactly the right height. And what's remarkable about this is that precision costs nothing. It just requires a tape measure, a level, and the willingness to care. Because the brain doesn't consciously notice tight tolerances, it just feels the room shift from provisional to intentional, and intentional is where expensive lives. So far, we've talked about what to remove, what to replace, and how to align what's left. But there's another mistake that catches even people who've done all of that. And it's the mistake of having too many good things competing for the same job. Have you ever stood in a room that had a large piece of art, a bold pendant light, and an oversized sculptural object, and somehow felt like none of them were particularly impressive? That's not a coincidence. That's a phenomenon researchers call attentional competition. And it works like this. When the brain enters a room, it immediately tries to establish a visual hierarchy. It's looking for a protagonist, one thing to land on, one thing to organize the rest of the room around. But when three things are all competing for that role, the brain can't resolve the hierarchy. So it does something interesting. It averages them. And the average of three impressive things is consistently less impressive than any one of them would be alone. Three heroes produce no hero. This is what designers call the singularity principle, and expensive rooms follow it without exception. There is always one clear protagonist, a massive piece of art, a fireplace, a light fixture that owns the room, and everything else acts as a supporting character. The furniture isn't trying to be noticed. The accessories aren't competing. The entire room is organized around a single point of confidence. And when the brain finally finds that hierarchy, it lands on the protagonist and registers it fully, which is why a room with one extraordinary thing always feels more expensive than a room with three things that are almost extraordinary. So identify the hero of your room. If you have three things competing for the title, move two of them somewhere else, because a room that knows what it is always feels more expensive than a room that's still trying to figure it out. Now I want to talk about something that feels counterintuitive the first time you hear it, and then becomes one of those things you can never unsee. Empty space is expensive, not as a design preference, not as an aesthetic choice, as a psychological signal with roots that go back further than any design trend. For most of human history, only the genuinely wealthy could afford to leave space unused. An empty room, a corridor wider than necessary, a surface with nothing on it. These were markers of surplus, of having more than you needed, of not being governed by scarcity. And the brain, which is still running the same status assessment it ran centuries ago, reads negative space exactly the same way today. So when every corner of a room is filled, a chair here, a plant there, a basket in every gap, the brain doesn't read it as cozy, it reads it as scarcity, as the need to maximize every available inch because there isn't enough to spare. And rooms that feel scarce never feel expensive, because genuine abundance doesn't need to fill every inch. It can afford to leave some empty. You can see this in action in almost any genuinely high-end space. Wide walkways with nothing in them, empty corners that aren't being used for anything, surfaces that have one object on them rather than five. And what you're reading in those spaces, even if you've never put it into words, is confidence. The confidence of a room that knows it has enough. So pull your furniture away from the walls. Even 2 or 3 inches of space behind a sofa creates what designers call a shadow gap, a thin sliver of darkness that the brain reads as breathing room. That adjustment costs nothing and takes 5 minutes, but it signals something the brain responds to immediately, that this room has more than enough space to spare. And finally, I want to talk about the most overlooked signal of value in any room, and also the only one on this list that you genuinely cannot buy. It's time. A room where everything is brand new, every surface pristine, every object looking like it arrived last week, nothing showing any evidence of age or use, reads to the brain as a showroom. This is what designers call the patina effect. And it's the reason that the homes of people who have been wealthy for generations feel different from the homes of people who became wealthy recently. One is full of things with patina, the other is full of things that are new. And the brain, which has been reading these signals for thousands of years, knows the difference between something that has been owned and something that has just been bought. So stop trying to keep everything perfect. Let the brass oxidize. Let the leather soften. Buy one vintage piece with a genuine history and let it exist alongside your newer things. Because a room with a past always feels more expensive than a room that was delivered in a single afternoon. And that's not something you can fix by spending more. It's something you fix by letting time do what only time can do. Making a home feel expensive isn't about the furniture you buy. It's about the signals you send and the brain you're sending them to. So the next time you walk into a room that feels expensive and you can't figure out why, now you know. It passed all 6 tests. And now that you understand what those tests are, you can start running them on your own space. Because the gap between a room that looks fine and a room that feels expensive isn't money, it's knowledge. And now you have it. If you want to see how I apply these 6 signals to a real room from scratch, the exact sequence, the specific decisions, and the framework I use to make it repeatable, subscribe and follow us for more.